So call to order, and does anybody
recording in progress?
Nice. Call to order. Does anybody have any additions, removals, or adjustments to any of the items on the agenda? Nope. Okay. Are there any members of the public here who would like to share? Look at us go. Okay.
It's almost time to go home.
So regular business. So thank you, Jessica, for getting this to us. And it was really great to look through. I appreciate Chris for printing it out for those of us who are here today. And a couple of people had asked, so how are we going to rank tonight? And I wanted to say, I should have been more clear, but tonight we're not going to do any ranking. Basically today, I just want us to sort of we've seen it. Finally, it's all in one place. And I just want us to have a chance to sort of respond to it, ask questions of each other or of Jessica or of Valerie, about any of the submissions if we know them, and share our observations. And we're not going to choose winners. We're not going to say, I think we should do this one. That's not what we're planning to do today. And we don't have to make our recommendations. We have a whole nother meeting this month. And so I want to just sort of sit with this a little bit and talk about it. And then we'll transition from that and we'll talk about our next meeting and what we want our process and our steps to be to move towards recommendations based on this information, whether we want to do ranking together or individuals, et cetera. But we don't have to decide that to start. I just wanted to start by just experiencing a little bit and seeing what people's thoughts are. So before we do that, Jessica, do you have anything that you wanted to share with us about the experience of entering it, or any thoughts or concerns that you had? And I also am curious, did your students actually do this, or did you just do this? Because it happened really fast, and I was super impressed by that, but I wondered.
Yes, so that was just me. They're too early in the class yet to take this on, but after they turn in their assignments in another 2 weeks, I plan to have them doing more work for you. So you all will get to meet them and hopefully give them some work. Yeah, so what I ended up doing was sometimes on the postcards or even in the surveys, people had more than one thing. And so I ended up splitting those apart just so I could code them. So if they made similar suggestions like more trails and a dog park, that was coded under recreation. So I kept those together. But if they said build more sidewalks and make a dog park, I split them apart because one was coded for infrastructure and the dog park would be coded for recreation. And so those codes are on the second page of the spreadsheet, and it's what you all adopted in your last meeting. I just used those. One thing you might want to...
Oh, sorry, Jessica. So I played around with this and printed it out and broke it out. So anyone who has a hard copy, it's actually page 1 when you mention the codes. So
okay.
Weren't so confused.
Yeah. And so, one thing you might want to decide as a group is that can always be recoded. So those were the original codes that you had. If those are helpful, that's fine. We could also break it down even further. So there were sidewalks, there was water. I mean, there were several categories for even something like infrastructure. And so it's up to you whether you think it makes sense to keep it in the bigger grouping, if you want it split into a smaller grouping. And then what I tried to do is for each code, I sorted it by code, and then I took everything in that code and added it to each one of the pages so that you could see everything all together, but then you could also see it code by code. So if it's infrastructure, is it roads, water, sidewalks, what's there? So that's the way I did the coding. And, it was kind of interesting. I also got some really funny ones. There was one postcard that just said, how should the town spend this money? And they just wrote cocaine.
That was my favorite.
So that was, so whoever says data, isn't fun, hasn't seen these. I didn't include cocaine. I didn't think that you would be funding that. So I didn't include that in there, but it was pretty funny. And then I also got a lot of really grumpy ones, like if you don't know how to spend the money, you should just send it back. So I didn't include just grumpy, weird stuff in there, but anything that was like a real response, I included in here, including some of the ones that I included under taxation that were basically like, give us the money, like make our taxes lower. So those all appear in there. You can see also that a lot of them are pretty general, like affordable housing. So, sometimes we got more detailed ideas, but a lot of times it was just, this is my priority, this particular thing. So I'm happy to take any questions if people have that, but that's basically the way that I broke it down. And also, sometimes it was a judgment call, like, is it infrastructure or is it a service? So I tried to do that in the best way that I could, but you'll be able to see then on each sheet, what gets coded which way.
No, it seemed like you did a really nice job of it.
Thank you.
Is there any significance to the gray lines of various thicknesses and various numbers?
Mark them off.
Right. I was going to go over that on the next piece. So Jessica, as you can see, what's on the screen here, I took your data and then I broke it out into individual pages, parsed off a little bit of it, did some work, but made it so it was one page printable. And then I added the lines to it so that it was easier to follow the data and get a very clear separation between each object. So anything that is in a white line in a continuous white area is one idea. Anything in a continuous gray area was one idea. So what you see, each one of these has a tab and this is all printable, and I can share out a link to this, anyone who wants this exact document.
I had a question. One of the questions I had is, I know that most of the ideas that came through the focus groups, the postcards, and the website fell into the more general categories as suggestions or just thoughts or ideas. And some of the ones that came directly to Vala that were on the matrix were much more thorough and thought out. And so I just wanted to note that, because, where you see in the source code and it tells you number 1, those are the ones that are from Valerie's matrix. And not all of those are thought out. Some of them very general, but some of them are. And I just thought it was helpful for us to know that, so that if you feel like you want more information, many of those will have more information. And I don't know if people feel like they do. And I don't know, Valerie, if you have a suggestion for whether the best way for people to access that additional information is through the matrix or through the file, just to come in here and look at the file, or Jessica, if you had thoughts about that too. So I'm interested to hear from either or both of you what your thoughts are, if people want to see the detail where there is some.
I no longer have the physical file. I gave that to Jessica.
I have everything. Yes, and I'm happy to, make that information accessible. I kept all the hard copies of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have is not dependent on me or how I coded it. So I'm happy to give those to Porter if that, or Chris. I don't know who would be the best person to keep all of that. I just simply kept it so that when the students get started with their work, that they would have access to it. But I'm happy to share it also so that you guys can see what each postcard looked like. Or we also have the postcards. I kept them in the rubber bands that Valerie had them in, showing where we collected them. I don't know if that makes any difference, but like library versus town hall, the dump, so all of that stuff is preserved exactly as it was, if anyone wants to see it.
Perfect. And I think that we don't have to decide that right now, but perhaps at the end of this meeting, when we're talking about next steps and how we want to move forward, if people want access to that information, then we can talk about how we can put that in a central location and make it available to people.
We can do both.
What other? Yeah.
The digital files are easy.
Easy, right?
And then the paper files we just have here at the office.
What other questions do people have, or initial reactions or thoughts? Let's stick with questions first.
I remember you made a comment that you wanted to see the actual cards. Have you already looked at those, or the original stuff?
I looked at a bunch of them. I have not looked at all of them, but I did personally find it I found it very interesting to look at a bunch of them.
Yes.
But I think that having looked at a bunch of them, you kind of have the flavor. And so I'm satisfied with, the data as it is here. It shows us which ones came from the postcards, but I thought it was really interesting just to see sort of the way people express themselves on the cards, and this captures it, but it's kind of fun.
I was interested in, did people put in more than one vote?
Yes.
You
Like,
mean like,
are there 5 of them that say, the pool?
yeah, well, you could definitely tell, like, for example, when I picked up a bunch from the library, there weren't very many in, it had been empty fairly recently prior, and 3 of the like 7 or 10 that were in there all said swimming pool.
Yeah,
And there was clearly a group of people who were talking about it, and they're like, oh my gosh, we should have that, and they put it on there.
okay.
So, and we talked about that a little bit at the last meeting, that I feel like I want to make sure this isn't a popularity contest, so that if we see something like that, the fact that there were 10 submissions or 4 submissions, I don't feel like we need to say like that means that that is the greatest import to our community.
Right,
But it's still interesting to see, and and that's one of the reasons why we talked about the idea of, as we do start to narrow our preferences for recommendation, that we could go back to the community and invite them to rank it. So we could say, like, here's our however many ideas,
yeah,
give us your impressions, your ranking, that's something we could consider moving forward. We don't have to decide that today either,
Okay.
but that's a possibility.
I'd like just to say something about the swimming pool thing. Like
Yes.
2 years ago, some father of a maybe 10-year-old told me that the one thing they really, really felt we needed was a swimming pool, because his daughter had been in some kind of a synchronized swimming group, and there was like no place that she could practice when the pool wasn't available at school. And so, there is probably a group of 15 kids in the North Addison County. I don't know where the synchronized swim, but it doesn't surprise me that there might, show up a bunch of kids all saying that's what they want.
Yeah, exactly.
And to your point, so I emptied the suggestion box in the office every Monday, Wednesday, Friday when I came in the office. And yeah, you could tell if there was a lot of cards in it, it was quite often 5 or 6 of the same thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't one person like jamming the box,
Right.
but like you said, it was probably a group of people sitting in the lobby and they're yammering away, and they're like, "Oh, you're right. We all need a bus," and we wrote bus, and it went. So it was funny how that transitioned.
One
I
thing
just
that
stuck them in the pile.
One thing that I noted about the pool category that Betsy brought up was that there seemed to be 2 distinct groups. There was one group that was really interested in the pool for kids, like swimming lessons, having a community pool like Virgins or Middlebury does, where kids can go swim in the summer. But then there was another group that seemed more focused on seniors and adults, and they wanted like exercise programming in the pool, and they wanted community swim time. And so there seemed to be 2 distinct groups that came up in the way they described wanting the pool.
Other questions?
Chris, I noticed in the printable copy you put together the index of codes and the complete compilation. I'm not finding those.
No, I did those as separate because to do print all the way so it would be printed as a consistent page. I kept those separate. So like you said, the index and the entire data set are in a separate file. The one that was sent out, which is also the one you sent out. Incorporating, I couldn't make it print nice, and I was having issues.
But everybody has that data if they want to manipulate it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a question, but I feel like this is very impressive that people really responded.
Yeah,
And
and the
really,
diversity, I'm just
yeah,
looking through the
agree.
services. Some of the categories I feel like we can subdivide easily. Housing is affordable and senior. Done. Transportation is EV charging, some bus shelters. But then some of them, they're just such great ideas. You just want to support everyone.
I know.
It's pretty
I'm
fantastic.
excited about this at so many levels. You know, I feel like the community really did respond to our efforts and outreach, and that is incredibly rewarding to me. Not surprising, because I think Bristol is the best town ever, but I think that, you know, that was really rewarding. But I also am really glad that we did this with such an open end.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I just feel like there are so many terrific ideas here, and yeah, we can't fund them all, which is totally fine, but we can, you know, definitely think about ways to network, to market, to communicate existing programs and services, which are, you know, a lot of the things people are asking for exist, and we just need to try to, you know, make them more available. So that is certainly something that I'm excited for us to, you know, help foster as we hand this off next spring when we're done. So, so I'm glad that those are all there.
And also, again, just looking at the housing one here, like Addison County Regional is working with our planning commission right now, and their focus is on rewriting the housing section of our zoning.
Yeah.
And they want this data. They know it's not like hard numbers, but they want to see what the field, because it's hard sitting in a planning commission. I've done it for many years. It's 7 and 8 of you, and you're guessing what's right.
Yeah.
Here you have some actual direction from the citizenry, which is so nice to have.
One of the questions that I had was kind of to that point, Chris, is that, you know, I read in various news sources about ARPA money this, ARPA money that. I know it's not our ARPA money, but where is that going? And I've talked about ARPA money for housing, for example. You know, where's that money coming from? Where's that money going? And how do we try to make sure Bristol gets some of that money so we don't have to use our money for, you know, doing something that we don't know anything about, like creating housing? That's not select board's job, you know, but we want to support it. How do we, you know, is there a way for us to leverage this money? And I know, Valerie, this is something we tried from the very beginning was, you know, I tried to get the VLCT to tell me, you know, they have a person whose job it is to do, you know, and she didn't even return my call or my email. And I was like, what the heck, you know? So like, you know, VLCT has somebody on staff, but they didn't help me say, you know, here's where the money is. We tried to get information about what other towns are doing, you know, and except to the extent that we have people who have connections in other towns, we have no idea what they're doing. So, you know, I'm a little frustrated with that, but I'm just wondering as time goes by, if either Chris or Valerie at the municipal level, or maybe the select board are hearing, you know, what other money is out there so that we can say like, because that was one of our things is we don't want to spend money if there's another source. So,
which makes me think of all of like the education pieces, like what is our district using their ESSER funds for, which is the educational piece of that.
Is that kind of money goes to school?
So there's, I don't know exactly how much or what, but I do know that there are funds that our district received. And I know that one piece of that pie was they bought new bleachers for the elementary school. Well, maybe if they had this information, maybe they would have used it differently. So I wonder if it's getting those individuals at the table to look at some of this data, or they, you know, take out that's applicable to them and say this, we should be having maybe a conversation.
Like, good point. Like it should be a two-way street. Like we should be telling the school district and the regional planning, as well as the select board and our own planning commission, like here's the ideas and the information and the description of the need. And we all should be saying like, what are you doing with your money? And how much money do you have left? And where are you gonna, you know?
So I wonder if that's like a school board meeting. I wonder if that's somehow being a public forum to the school board and saying that this is stuff.
Or at a minimum, I would almost start just reaching out to the SU's office. And just
but like, how do we as a committee do that? Do we say like, oh, well, you did the education focus group, you want to call them? And
right, sure. I mean, I'd be happy to. Yeah, absolutely.
I had a question. I kept thinking about the thing I was talking about last week about, you know, taking over that whole complex or making a community center and daycare and police station and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And besides trying to find wealthy people who would love to have their name on a building, it occurred to me that we could do some sort of a quasi habitat thing where we talk contractors into donating a week of their time or something, and then they go for posterity onto a metal plaque in the building. And then whether or not there needs to be a 501c3 to be in charge of it, so that anybody who donates to it can take it as a tax break. And I don't know where that would, that whole structure, I mean, is that the select board? I mean, who? Anyway, I mean, it seems to me that there could be funds and expertise that could be leveraged, but that, that could resolve a number of these issues. But I don't know how we could put that together, who it is that would spearhead setting that kind of thing up.
So we'll put that on the list of, like who else and how could do these things will be part of our conversation for the like communications, marketing, networking, liaison building, et cetera, as we come out. Hands up. I
don't know who had their hand up first, Jessica or Valerie. I have no idea.
Jessica, go.
Okay. All I was going to say is that for part of the students' data collection, their job will be to reach out to the Vermont League, the other towns, different connections that we have at the select board, the governor and representative's office, because a lot of the federal ARPA money is being decided how to be spent by the governor. So like broadband, housing, those are his priorities. And then, the legislature is also playing a role. And so my plan was to have the students reach out to all of these different sources and try to collect that data. Now, if they don't respond like Porter found, then, I don't know. I don't know if a group of students who are doing it for, a project might elicit some better responses. I don't know. But I was planning on having them do that. And I can share everything that they find, of course. But Valerie might also have good ideas for how to do this.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great.
And I'll say, so just for our purposes, their work, because they're in a semester, has to be done by basically Thanksgiving, right?
By the middle of December, but I'm going to try to push them to do most of this work in the month of November. Yeah.
And so we could still have Allison go ahead and reach out to our own local school district, to say, here's the information we have regarding education, and how much money do you have, and what have you committed, and what are your priorities for what you haven't yet spent. And then Chris said he could do that for the regional planning. And I know you're already in touch with the Planning Commission. So that'll give us 3 ways to get some information, and Valerie might have some ideas too. You're muted still.
Darn it. I do have some other ideas, and it jives with the notion of beginning to list other resources. And I think I'm happy to take a first crack at perhaps using these tables and adding a column of other resources, other sources of funding, or other human resources to help accomplish that. And that might help us narrow down some of the outreach, and also just some of the priorities in terms of what to use the ARPA money for. So I'm happy to take a first crack at that by adding a column.
How do people feel about that?
I'm good.
Yeah,
Sure.
sounds great.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great offer, Valerie. And we recognize that there's hundreds of ideas here, and that there's some of them you might be like, maybe this, I don't know. So that's okay too. If there's, as you're doing that, if there's a way for you to be like, there's definitely money for this, as opposed to like, you might think about this, that would be helpful, just so we know.
Right, some direction.
Right. So, I mean, the first example that pops in my head, that's a very quick one to delineate. Like, we saw sidewalks in the infrastructure.
Right. We have a sidewalk capital plan.
Yeah, we have that already. So that's an easy where.
And there are also grant funds through VTrans for that too.
Right. So
And the
those,
select board is taking care of that.
right. So that would be one of those where
Right.
it's great to hear from the populace, but it's not our focus.
Right.
And it's also, but that's what I mean about, like, I think so much of this is information for us to help the select board, the town staff, and the community to be more upfront about communications, marketing, networking, and, relationship building, to say, there's obviously people who, my next door neighbor was complaining about my street, and I'm like, we're on the plan. You read the capital, like read your town report, read your capital plan, like it's there. But, we don't all do that.
Yeah.
So that just gives us an opportunity to have more outreach and saying like, guess what's coming up, Rob?
So as we're talking about these other sources and funds and that sort of thing, one question that keeps coming up in my mind, because I'm not clear on this, I don't know if anybody here is or not, with the school, when it comes to, there were a lot of suggestions related to the school and the school grounds and the different school facilities. Are those actually town resources anymore, or are those school district resources that the town does not have a say
Well, the school
over
has
anymore?
budgets for certain things. That's what we would need to define, but the school has a budget. And so, well, let's see if I can find an example. Well, on childcare, there's a sentence that says, we're short-staffed with appropriate educators for support for high needs children. That's a school budget issue, right? Short staff. Staffing comes under the school budget issue.
But like the facilities, the buildings, are
Yeah,
those
that's
town
cool.
properties,
Oh.
or are those school district
right,
properties
they're
that the
cool.
town is separate from?
Yep, totally separate.
Okay.
Like
We own no schools
orbits
anymore.
all together.
Yeah, so, that's one thing. So if we took out everything that's town budget or general fund budget or highway budget, and we took out all the stuff that's the school, then we would be left with more realistic.
Right, but what if the school budget can't pay for the implementations that are mentioned repeatedly? What if this is kind of over and above? I worry about saying, well, school budget should do that, so now we could ignore everything having to do with education.
Is there
When
gonna
they may not have the money to do that.
Would there be a match from the other towns in the school district on that?
That's a great question too, and that's another opportunity for us to say, if it's something that has to do with Mount Aid, then we could be reaching out to the other 4 of the 5 towns. But I think your point's a good one too, Helen. Like, well, I think, yes, as Diane said, we should note that that's technically school responsibility and property and not our purview. And it's something that somebody feels needs to be happening and isn't happening. So if they want to fund it, great. If they are already funding it and this person's misinformed, then we need to work on that. If they're not able to fund it and it's not happening, is it something we want to consider?
Right.
So that's,
Exactly.
there's a lot of nuance there.
Yeah.
But I think it's still good to have that information.
Yeah.
And that's probably not one we need a category for necessarily from Valerie. Like we can just, as we look at it, if it has to do with the school facility or educational services from the school, not childcare, but school, that we know that's technically not town purview, but that doesn't mean that, like you said, and we might still say the town wants to bump this up or have recreation department look into it or whatever.
I think as we're reaching out to the public, kind of getting back to them, it's important not just to say, well, that's
Not our job.
That's the school,
Right.
because you've got people who did not grow up here, have not been here a very long time, and there isn't going to be a category in their brain for school isn't under the government. So if you just say, well, that's a school thing. Well, they say, well, I know perfectly well it's a school thing,
And you should be- yeah, and I think you're right. That's I
But you
appreciate.
just say they have their own tax base and their own budget.
Yeah,
You
that's a
know,
good
Called
point.
property taxes.
Yeah,
That's
so,
what we pay our property taxes.
right, but you need to articulate that to
Yes,
people.
yeah, because people don't know.
I think
Yeah,
that's
you're
a
right.
really great point. If there, and I think that as we communicate, as we do narrow our recommendations and we communicate, like, here are the things we're putting forward, we want your feedback on them. Here's the things that we're, that came in good ideas, or if you want to see the good ideas that we didn't, but not to be like, well, that's not our job, but to say like, we didn't fund that because there's already a funding source or because there's already a plan or,
Or
it's
maybe
free.
have,
It's education.
maybe have three sections in our
Multiple
report.
sections.
Here's what we are doing. And here's what the schools are doing, and here's what the government is already planning to do. You know, but people need to have all of that information, or else they don't think their question got answered.
Right, you're right.
Yep.
Valerie.
Yes, and there are also opportunities for partnerships with the school. For example, we're involved in 2 right now. One is the Airport Drive Sidewalk Project scoping study. It's likely to be a joint town and municipal sidewalk project. And also the town got a grant for stormwater planning on the elementary school property. And designed 100% design of a stormwater infiltration system behind the elementary school by the playground. But the next step is for the school to implement that. But the town took the initiative to do it, and the school was very cooperative and excited about it. So that's another example of a potential partnership, because a lot of the grants go to municipalities to do the work, and then we kind of work through it the rest of the way.
Thanks.
I might just chime in. This also, for me, sort of seems to parallel any of the sort of town private partnerships or town nonprofit partnerships, right? In some sense, much of the work that those groups are doing is not the town's responsibility, but certainly we've had many suggestions about ways that town funds could go to support the work that they're doing. And so for me, thinking about supporting the school doesn't feel all that dissimilar from thinking about the request we had the other day from the Leibniz Lodge for the elevator, right? Like, that's not the town's responsibility, but it might benefit the town should we be able to support the work that others are already doing. So if that helps us think about ways in which there are town direct projects, but then also town maximizing the use of people or places or spaces or programs that are already in place, but could use a little push. I feel like that still nevertheless might be a really good use of our money, because then we're gonna have to create it from scratch. And maybe to one of the big concerns for the committee is we might not have to maintain it in the long run.
I mean, one that jumps at me just as I'm trying to think, like one of those things that maybe it could be something as simple as like the wood shop needs all new equipment. I don't know if they do or not. I'm just using that as an example. The school doesn't have the budget to do it, but we feel that the long-term advantage to working with them to help them facilitate that would be we've got something that said, pay for the renovations they're doing. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, I think, more like very focused more projects that could maximize these dollars on both sides.
And that check off some of our criteria, like, leveraging the funds for the future, making an investment that we can look back years from now and be like, the ARPA money did that, serving a broad number of people. So there's a lot of ways where partnerships could be good possibilities for the use of the ARPA money.
I read that suggestion that somebody wanted to invest the whole sum,
Yes.
That is actually
And,
one of the things we're not allowed to do.
Well, that was my question. I thought, I bet that's in the rules. I bet we can't do that, because that would give us an ongoing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nope.
No, by 2026, I think it's all gonna be spent, or whatever we don't spend, we give back.
Very explicit. Yeah, because I like that idea
It
too.
wouldn't be a bad idea to have then a fourth category for, these networking with other organizations to get, to help our people because that helps to educate the public into a cooperative mindset, which the world is sorely missing right now. And just say, we don't all have to, each guy has to do it and get the credit for it. We can all help one another because it will be good for the whole community.
Any other observations, first impressions?
We got a lot of data.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
stuff. It's great.
Yeah, it was nice, I thought.
The one thing I kind of struggled with was the somewhat vagueness of some of the things when it's like affordable housing. Well, is that, classified as affordable housing or like low income housing, or is it just something that more people can afford in the middle class range, lower priced housing, or is it, what is meant by that? And that's just one because it seems to be on the screen, but that's all.
That's true. I mean, so many of the ideas were very general in nature, and whether that person didn't know what they meant by affordable housing, or whether they knew what they meant but didn't clarify it to us.
They might know that it meant something they could afford, but they might not know if they fit into the classification that the government means by affordable housing.
Yeah. Are we ready to move on to how we want to go from here and next steps? Have we done our first interaction and engagement with this, impressions and observations and stuff? Yes.
Some of them make me do the same thing.
Oh,
Giggling as she reads.
I thought you were crying.
No, maybe I should be.
Checklist.
That was funny. It was the first one. I was like, oh.
Okay. So at our next meeting, we'll have all, now we've all got this. And, we could do this a couple of different ways. One of the things that we talked about at the very beginning was coming together as a group and having some ranking criteria and sort of putting things through filters to do that. But in subsequent meetings, we talked about the idea that we might all just come together and say, having looked at it, now that it's in front of us, I'm feeling strongly that, here's the 10 ideas that I want to explore further or, go through. So I want to hear from each of you in the group. If you have an instinct, do you feel like it's important for us to have some set criteria, whether those are our committee sort of philosophies or whatever, or something else that we want to put all of these things through to see how they come out? Or do we want to sort of come to our next meeting after going through this and be like, I want to put on the table the ones that I'm excited about, and each of us sort of, explore that, right?
Should we? I know. I'm like, oh. Should we go through first though and take out the ones that we know there's already?
So yeah, I mean, Valerie's
that
offering to do that so that we might without too much pressure on you, Valerie, you have a time frame, but we might within a day or two have a set of data with the freshly added category to show us which ones we could maybe set aside for now.
Right, because it's already being dealt with somewhere else. Because that would be, I feel like, a waste of time if we put a bunch of stuff down on our things and then we come back and we're like, oh, that's already being taken care of here and that's already being taken care of here.
I would agree with that.
Go back to the drawing board.
I'll have an updated list by next week for you guys.
Is that timely enough? Because we're meeting in 2 weeks. So if we have that
Right.
by
I'll have this done by next week.
Wow, she's amazing.
Yeah.
We're just doing a round of applause here for you.
Thank you.
Both you and Jessica, the
Thank you.
efficiency awards. Okay, I agree. That's super helpful. That's a great start.
So I'm thinking, I'm very analytical, and I like the idea of everything ending up with a numerical score based on the components of affecting the most number of people, leveraging. But then I thought about the details. I really like the idea. A lot of people have said we need to get electrical vehicle charging stations.
Yeah.
Lots and lots and lots. Okay. How many citizens have an electric vehicle?
No, because we don't have chargers yet.
Well, I don't think that's why. You can
But
charge it
also,
at
if we
home.
look at where the state is going, that
I
this would be
know.
an investment.
Then how do
So
you
exactly, how do
assess
we
that?
know?
Assessment.
I think
Right.
that's a great question.
But I believe that is the future. And so we need to face that.
Yeah.
And those charging stations, you can.
Yeah.
Oh,
I might also tell you, I was
It's
talking with Ian the other day, and he was at the electric.
Yeah.
So I don't know where that money goes.
Now say that.
I was gonna say, I was talking with Ian the other day, and he went to like the electric vehicle fest over the weekend,
yeah.
and he said there were 2 or 3 separate sources, Green Mountain Power, somebody else who would come in and actually install those for the town without using ARPA funds. So in terms, that sounded like from Green Mountain Power that was the plan. So, so we can check in with,
Check that.
we can check in with him as well, but that might be a way where, depending upon what that program really looks like and whether that actually meets the perceived demand for that, there may be ways that we can actually go in and get
The
that
demand,
done.
I believe, is ever increasing.
I
And I think school buses should be.
But I mean, as an example, I think that's a
Yes.
good example.
Yeah.
And I think, but to your point, Helen, about like that instinct or that, like, wouldn't it be nice to sort of have them all put through this sort of filter thing? I think it's okay if our measurement, like if our ruler is not hard objective, because so many of these ideas are so vague.
Yeah.
So I think if we decide to go that route, so if we as a group say, okay, we're going to add a column that's going to be on a scale of 1 to 3, how much does this leverage our funds? On a scale of 1 to 3, does this serve a broad number of residents? Like if we decide to do that,
Sure.
we could each subjectively make our own guess.
Yeah.
And that's not going to give us objective data about whether that line item fulfills that need, but it does take the temperature of our committee to see what we think of as a sense. And I think that is still data, that's still a type of analysis, and we can recognize and acknowledge that it, a lot we just don't know.
I mean, some of what we're doing is gonna be emotional as well. I mean, some of us have ties to certain things,
Whatever.
whatever it is, whatever your passion is. And the two approaches you looked at when I said a little bit of both, I wasn't
Yeah.
kidding.
No, he was, I don't know, because he was saying it silently, so you probably couldn't see him on the Zoom call, but Chris is going both.
Yeah. So in my mind, it's really starting the first round of taking these lists and go through and find what you like.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're doing it, remember sort of the four philosophies that we have out there. There's not another funding source for maximizing the number of people, those 4 things. And you're like, oh, look at this. It all comes, because in the end, I think we need to get that piece done. And then when we come down to, let's say we end up with 20 items, and after that, then we start running it through the filter of, okay, in all reality, this is a bizarre funding source that we might be able to do this, or here's how we would leverage it better. So I think we need to make sure that we do stay personally attached to this sum as well.
It's okay. I agree. And I think that, so I, like Helen, I like the tidiness of running everything through a little thing and having my little mathematical chart. And then I also cheerfully reserve the right to say, yeah, I gave that a 0 and that's my first choice, so I think that's okay. So the way that I was thinking I would do it almost regardless of what as a group we do was probably that. Like I would probably make my columns and give them all a little score of my own subjective ranking, and then go through and highlight my favorites and argue why, okay, Porter, why did you like that? And try to make my case. And there are also some in here that I'm like, hard no. And I want to express why, even if it gets a better score, or if somebody else thinks that's their favorite thing, I'm like, this is why that feels uncomfortable to me, and I need to be
Right.
convinced.
Yeah, so we could all do it because it needs to be weighted. It can't be because I didn't like it. It has to be because 5 people didn't like it. You know what I mean?
So you're saying you feel like everybody should do the 1 to 3 with the categories, and also the my favorites and why, and my uncomfortables and why.
So
Do you want to share your Venn diagram? Will your Venn diagram be useful in this exercise?
Maybe, but not yet. I think everybody remembers that, right?
Mhm.
And I only had one circle for our principles or philosophies, whereas what we're doing here is sort of maybe giving layers for each of them. But Diane, I want to make sure I understand. Were you saying that everybody should do both of those things?
Well, it's not fair. Like if you and I were the only ones who did that,
Okay.
and we said, we don't like that, therefore we're not going to do it. That's not.
Oh, no.
That's not.
No,
fair.
I wasn't
Everybody
saying that.
needs to be able to say yes or no.
I was saying more do the exercise for myself so that I would be prepared for a conversation, so that I could say, like, these are the ones I'm not feeling comfortable with, and here's why.
Maybe we use the weighted system after we've all come in with our top 10. And then when we were having our conversation, you hate it, I love it. Okay, as a group,
Let's suss it
score-
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then let's maybe score it and
Okay,
then
yeah.
see how
So,
it goes.
because, and the reason why I don't like scoring it first, we did that on a fire truck.
We did.
And
On the truck.
on the truck,
Okay.
and it showed the huge failure in that, because something as critical as the right size motor got a 3,
Yeah, okay.
and orange paint got a 3.
Right.
Totally different beasts in level
So
of
it does,
importance.
right.
So that's why
Okay.
when I said the emotion and what you
Mhm.
feel is important, and you
Yeah.
do that
Okay.
first, and then we get down into
Yeah.
it's like I said, we could probably knock this down to like 30, 40 things between the group.
I'll bet it's even fewer.
Yeah. Well,
I'm just going random numbers. I'm hoping for that, and you said we can apply this more filter.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Remember, say, like, just like moment of silence, please, because I forgot what I was gonna say. Okay, what did you say? You said, thank you first, come with her. I don't remember what it was. Dang, but I seen your moment. It was like, you said, anyway, whatever.
We were just gonna come with like our top 10 and
Or,
why.
oh, so here's another thing. I don't think this is the thing, but,
Okay.
so we talked last time about lump versus split, right? We got 1.1 million. So, you know, I don't want to put a number on it, say, come with your top 10. I want to say, come with your emotional instinct. Like, so maybe somebody's going to say, I want to put all my eggs in one basket and I feel really
Okay.
strong. This is my one thing. And maybe somebody else is going to say, I want to spread some money out. I like these 10 things. And that can be the basis of
Sure.
we can
Yes.
start there.
Whatever you're passionate about. Exactly.
so
Bring it.
We
Right.
don't have to commit to that.
No.
And then,
Okay.
so then hopefully we'll come out of the next meeting with some consensus on, you know, whether we're starting to move in the direction of multiple ideas or whether we're starting to move in the direction of fewer or singular ideas, and then how we want to apply criteria. And we can do that. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. The timing of this might work out well, because so we have our next October meeting and we come with our emotional response and start to hash that out. And then we can start to layer the filters, and then we come to November and there'll be more information about what others are doing and what those sources are coming from Jessica's group. And I'm actually, you know, earlier you had joked like maybe none of those people will return calls for your students either. I think part of it was I was calling people in July. And a lot of towns and maybe the LCT, they're like, we don't know. Like nobody knew yet what they were doing, even though some towns like Jollywell started spending money. But I think a lot of towns, you know, that the data wasn't there. And I think that you'll have a better response now because there's been some traction. So Betsy.
I think that as we go through the list as individuals and we're having our emotional, you know, yes, yes, yes. When we get done with going through the list, we might have more than 10 things. We might each have like 18 or something. And then we might each as individuals use our favorite filter to narrow that down. And then when we get into the group, not only are we seeing, you know, which things like everybody said yes to, and then when we get to where we're kind of arguing about it, then each person can argue for the filter that they used.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it'll shake down.
but we're doing this after we get the data from
Valerie,
Valerie.
yeah.
So
So-
there's some we don't have to consider.
Don't do anything for a week.
Great.
And I think that, so even when Valerie gives it to us, if she says something's got another funding source, that's either a hard yes, definitely, or a, you know, there might be another option here, and it's like your biggest flaming passion, then you can still say, I feel like we need to, you know, use our money to leverage or support or grow or push, like, so you don't have to throw it out. Just, but that's information to know. And one of our goals was not to fund something where there was other money already.
Yeah.
But you can still share that it's important to you. So, but yeah, so that's step one is we'll get that information. So we'll add that column.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
There's one here that says broaden police service to
What page?
protect the whole town. It's page 12.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
police department comes under the select board, don't they? They're
Well,
not independent from.
but it's a,
It's the same
there's a
budget.
separate funding district. It's a separate budget. It's not a town budget because the police district is different than the town
Okay.
border.
It's the old village, basically, is what they utilize.
So what this person is saying that the police,
They want the whole town covered.
they want the whole town
not
covered
the
by our
village. Yeah.
police.
So that is a bigger thing than the police budget. That's a town.
It's way bigger than
Yeah.
us.
Okay, so thank you.
Been going on for 20 years.
Val,
It's a big
when you get it done, could it be available in hard copy? I would come. I mean, like, all of my office equipment is broken in the last week or two.
Once I get it, I will do very much what I did with this last list. I will,
Make it print outable.
Thank you.
Yeah, but it'd be good if, I mean, because my stuff just is not.
oh no, I make all the copies you need. I create the document. I would make
There'll be
everything.
a neon light outside of the town office that say Valerie has finished her work and Chris has printed it out.
All right.
So, yeah, so like over the weekend, I left some hard copies in the box out front if people wanted to, because I knew I wasn't gonna be around this weekend. So I tried to.
The box out front is what?
So if you face the door when you first came in, there's a silver box on the right. There used to be a drop box. Now there's a pickup box, and I had manila envelopes.
Yes, I didn't get
So-
it.
Only box on the right.
Inside the door.
Outside.
No, outside the door, outside the door. You stand outside, there's a silver thing. Only
But you can
box
just
on the
come in
right.
the office.
Yeah.
Look at it before. we
I'm here 3 days a week, and if I'm not here and you want to come in during one of the days I'm not, you let me know, and I leave it with the front desk. I will make sure you get it.
Okay,
All
well,
right.
Just reach out. I will make sure whatever works for you best.
And I will use the sheets that Chris developed with the lines and everything, and I'll just work from that.
Great. Great. We have a plan.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Any other input on next steps, process and next steps for the October 17th meeting?
I'm excited.
Me too. It astounds me how I
Now,
come to
what
a committee
colors,
meeting and I'm
what
saying,
colors are we going to use? The I like it is.
yeah, I highlighter. Okay, so somehow on our agenda, we the review and approve the April meeting notes, we somehow spaced. Somebody help me out here. Did we not approve all of the notes yet? We did or we did not?
We
what-
did the first
You
two.
did it.
We didn't do the last one.
Right,
Okay,
you did
so-
in the last meeting, you approved whatever notes were before that.
Did Sharon, okay, so she's put them up on the website?
I put them up.
Oh, somebody did. Thank you, Chris. Okay, so this says, review and approve the April meeting notes, but we mean to say, September here, right? Okay, so can I have a motion to, because we sent those out
Yes.
right after the last meeting, which
Yes,
is why you
you
didn't
did.
get them this time.
Yep.
So Helen's giving me a motion.
Yep.
Helen has moved to approve the September meeting notes. Were there any corrections? Nobody emailed me after we sent them out, so I'm guessing that it was fine. We tried to spell the names right,
good.
And I corrected it.
and he corrected the other ones. Okay, was there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Chris second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Great, okay, we have approved those, thank you. All right, anything else?
I move that the meeting be adjourned.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right,
Is there a second?
Second.
Record time.
No kidding.
okay.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
guys are
just, you know,
awesome.
this meeting